Cathy Engelbert's tenure unraveled not because of external scandal, but because of what she allegedly did behind closed doors. Her leadership, once praised for stability, descended into paranoia and suppression, where dissenting athletes found themselves isolated, benched, or quietly pushed out. This wasn't about managing conflict. It was about eliminating opposition. Emails, voice notes, and private accounts exposed the alleged strategy to neutralize star power that threatened her authority.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
And as the league fractured from within, Engelbert stayed the course, dismissing concerns and ignoring consequences, until the consequences showed up in the form of Adam Silver. Silver's dramatic response flipped the power dynamic overnight. In a rare public confrontation, he suspended Engelbert on the spot, signaling to the league and the world that toxic leadership has no place in professional sports. What emerged from the fallout was a clearer path forward, one rooted in transparency, driven by athlete voices and reinforced by accountability. The message was loud and unmissable. Leadership must serve the league, not dominate it. And when it fails to do so, it must go. The WNBA just went through one of the most dramatic leadership collapses in its history. And no, it wasn't caused by a PR scandal, a financial crisis, or even outside controversy. It came from inside the league, from the top. And now Cathy Engelbert is out. Not resigned, not reassigned, fired by Adam Silver himself. This wasn't subtle. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't something that happened in a back room, followed by a carefully worded press release. This was public, messy, and overdue, and it shook the foundation of the league in a way that will take years to recover from. For months, maybe longer, there were whispers. Something felt off. Players, coaches, and even some fans had noticed a shift. The league that marketed itself on empowerment, unity, and player-first values was starting to feel cold, controlled, corporate, silent. At the center of that silence, Cathy Engelbert. Behind the scenes, she was allegedly working to tighten her grip on the league, not by building it up, but by shutting key people down. Specifically, players, star players, influential figures, athletes with voices too big to be comfortably managed. And when those players started speaking up about issues in the league, on social media, in interviews and conversations with executives, it didn't sit well with Engelbert. According to internal reports and leaks, she didn't respond by listening. She responded by targeting. Emails, messages, and even voice notes painted a brutal picture. Engelbert wasn't just ignoring criticism. She was trying to eliminate it. She allegedly created a culture of intimidation, aimed at pushing outspoken players out of the spotlight or out of the league entirely. A move rooted in control, not leadership. Insecurity, not strategy. It didn't stop there. Internal pushbacks started bubbling up. Coaches started raising concerns. WNBA legends warned the league that Engelbert was building something toxic. Players felt like their voices, the ones the league used in marketing campaigns, were suddenly being labeled as liabilities. And still, nothing changed. Until the leaks dropped. That's when it all came crashing down. Leaked communications showed, in detail, a coordinated effort to suppress players. Alleged threats, exclusion from media campaigns, players being removed from league events with no explanation. And when those messages went public, so did the players' pain. The floodgates opened. Players, some of the league's biggest names, took to social media to share their experiences. Not petty complaints, not minor disagreements. We're talking about raw, emotional stories of being silenced, pushed aside, and made to feel like they were disposable. The WNBA wasn't just in crisis. It was in revolt. And that's when Adam Silver showed up. Not with a memo, not with a phone call, with a presence. He walked into a closed-door league meeting and made it clear this was over. Engelbert wasn't going to be handled quietly. She was being suspended immediately, and following the internal investigation, fired. It was decisive. It was public, and it sent a message, not just to the players, but to every executive in the room. No one is bigger than the league's integrity. not even the commissioner. What Silver did in that moment was more than damage control. It was a hard reset, the kind the league had avoided for too long. Because what Cathy Engelbert allegedly did wasn't just mismanagement. It was sabotage. She used her position not to elevate the league, but to eliminate anyone she viewed as a threat to her control. And that control came at a cost: player trust, fan respect, and the league's entire identity. Let's not forget, this is a league that built its image around activism, inclusion, and player empowerment. That proudly marketed itself as more than basketball. That leaned into its stars as both athletes and voices of change. But behind closed doors, that message was being dismantled. And not by trolls or critics or outside forces, but by the very person tasked with leading the league forward. The backlash was immediate. Sponsors threatened to pull out. Fans demanded accountability. And players, who had been holding back for far too long, let it all out. This wasn't about one bad executive decision. This was a betrayal of everything the WNBA claimed to be. And in that moment, Cathy Engelbert became the face of the hypocrisy. And what was most devastating wasn't just that she allegedly tried to push players out, but that the system let her get this far. That for months, her behavior went unchecked. That people raised concerns and nothing happened. Until it all went public. Only then did the league move. Only then did they start reinstating players, rewriting internal policy, and making statements about transparency and new beginnings. Because the truth is, this could have been stopped a long time ago. But the league waited, and that wait sent a message that will take years to undo. Now they're in full rebuild mode. Reinstated players, structural reforms, an overhaul of leadership and decision-making protocols, a new player advisory board, and commitments to transparency that should have been standard from the start. But none of that changes the fact that it took leaked voice memos and public breakdowns from players to finally force action. Adam Silver may have salvaged what was left, but the damage? That's real. And trust? That's not coming back overnight. Because here's what people are still asking. How did it get this bad? How did a league so tied to empowerment allow its leader to allegedly silence its own stars? That's what makes this different from a typical scandal. This wasn't some random executive caught in controversy. This was the commissioner of a league built on progressivism, allegedly working against the very players who gave it meaning. You don't walk away from that with a press release and a new hire. You rebuild from the ground up. And that's where the league is now. Rebuilding. Not just with new leadership, but with a new understanding that power unchecked always finds a way to protect itself. And if you're not constantly watching, constantly questioning, it will eat the very values it claims to protect. The WNBA got lucky. It had players willing to speak up, fans who demanded better, and a commissioner, Adam Silver, who, when the time came, didn't flinch. But the next time, it shouldn't take this much to do what's right. Let us know what you think. Was Engelbert's removal too late? Should the league have stepped in earlier? And what will it take to earn back the trust they just shattered? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like if you believe leadership should never come at the expense of integrity. Share this if you think silence shouldn't be a strategy. And hit subscribe if you want more real breakdowns of what's actually happening behind the scenes. No fluff, no spin, just truth. Because when the story gets buried, we'll be the ones digging it back up. The WNBA will never be the same after this. Cathy Engelbert's firing wasn't just the end of a commissioner's tenure. It was a public collapse of a power structure that had been quietly decaying from the inside. The kind of scandal that forces everyone, players, executives, fans, to question how much of what they believed was ever really true. This wasn't about one bad decision or even a string of questionable leadership calls. This was about control, about silencing, about the kind of behind-the-scenes maneuvering that turns a player-led league into a branding exercise, where athletes are only embraced when they're compliant, quiet, and safe. Engelbert didn't just fall, she was exposed. Exposed for allegedly targeting the very voices that made the league what it is. The rising stars, the outspoken leaders, the players who dare to speak up when things weren't right. And when those voices got too loud, she didn't listen. She tried to erase them. Let's not sugarcoat it. According to the leaks, Engelbert ran the league like a chessboard, positioning herself above the athletes. She allegedly viewed any challenge to her authority as a threat, not a conversation. And instead of building trust, she tightened her grip. Coaches saw it. Former legends warned her. Some players tried going through proper channels. Others just fell silent, scared of losing their careers. What was supposed to be a league built around athlete empowerment turned into a workplace of quiet fear. Until it all exploded. The leaks weren't minor. These were hard receipts, voice notes, direct quotes, written proof of decisions that weren't just harsh, they were calculated. Efforts to bench outspoken players. Emails about limiting their media appearances. Internal conversations about freezing them out of key league moments. And once that evidence dropped, the truth couldn't be spun anymore. What followed wasn't just a backlash, it was a revolt. Players who had kept their heads down for months finally stepped forward. They cried. They called it what it was. They described being punished for having opinions, frozen out for raising concerns, labeled difficult for caring about more than just scoring points. These weren't random outbursts. These were breakdowns. Wounds ripped open on camera. The league's silence in the days leading up to Engelbert's suspension was deafening. Sponsors were furious. The media circled. Fans were outraged. And through it all, Cathy Engelbert didn't say a word. That's when Adam Silver entered the room. Not as a PR rep, not as a distant figure trying to manage headlines, but as someone ready to take control. His entrance into that closed-door league meeting was surgical. Sources say there was no warm-up, no preamble. He confronted the situation head-on, addressed Engelbert directly, and made it clear that this wasn't salvageable. She was suspended on the spot. The internal investigation had already uncovered enough, and Silver didn't wait for the storm to pass. He ended it. Her firing followed soon after. And with that, the WNBA's leadership structure was decapitated in real time. A commissioner gone, a scandal fully exposed, and the league, sitting in the rubble of its own silence, trying to figure out how to rebuild trust that had shattered. Let's be clear, Cathy Engelbert was supposed to be the stabilizer, the business brain, the executive who would take the league to new heights financially. She did broker big sponsorships. She did oversee expansion talks. But none of that mattered when her leadership allegedly became rooted in paranoia and suppression. She stopped protecting the league's most valuable asset, its players, and started protecting herself, too. And when leadership turns inward like that, when power becomes more about preserving control than lifting others, the entire system rots. The reinstatement of targeted players was the bare minimum. That should have happened long before any leaks. These athletes weren't disruptive. They were necessary. They were the ones speaking up when no one else would. And they were punished for it behind closed doors in ways that were strategic and cruel. It took public exposure, emotional testimony, and fan outcry for the league to finally admit it had failed them. Let that sink in. This wasn't about poor communication. This was about institutional betrayal. The WNBA has always prided itself on being different, on being progressive, on elevating women's voices, particularly Black women's voices. That's what it sold to fans, to partners, to the public. But what Cathy Engelbert allegedly did showed that even the most progressive branding can mask a power system that punishes the very values it promotes. That disconnect between what the league claimed and what it tolerated is what makes this scandal so devastating. Because fans believed in this league. Players trusted that their leadership had their backs. Sponsors invested because of the league's values. And Engelbert, while smiling in press conferences and signing partnership deals, was allegedly silencing dissenting voices behind the scenes. The damage that does isn't just internal, it's cultural. It tells every future athlete, speak out, and you might be next. It tells every coach, loyalty won't save you from politics. It tells fans, the league you think you're supporting may not exist the way you think it does. So where does the WNBA go from here? Adam Silver made the right call. But this isn't over. Not even. The league has launched a full reform process. Policy reviews, new leadership requirements, transparent communication channels between players and executives. a player advisory committee with actual influence. All of it is necessary, but none of it matters if the culture stays the same. Because culture isn't fixed with a new rulebook. It's rebuilt one decision at a time. That means no more protecting leadership just because they bring in big deals. No more prioritizing public image over private reality. No more using athletes as mouthpieces for empowerment while silencing them when the cameras are off. The league now has to show it's serious. Not with press releases. Not with apology videos. With actions. Restore credibility. Set our player voices. Hire leadership that understands trust isn't optional. And most importantly, own what happened. No spin. No deflection. No pretending this was a challenging moment. This was a failure. A big one. And the only way to come back from that is to stop pretending it didn't happen exactly the way it did. 2. So where does this leave the players? For now, they're back. Reinstated. Reinvited into the league they helped build. But don't expect them to forget. Don't expect them to play nice just because leadership changed. They're watching. Closely. And they're done being polite about it. This league only exists because of them. And if it's going to survive this scandal, it needs to prove every single day that it's worthy of them. The fallout from Cathy Engelbert's firing isn't just going to disappear in a week. This wasn't one of those stories you cover, clean up, and move past. What went down inside the WNBA hit deep. And not just because a high-ranking executive was removed. Not just because players were mistreated. But because the entire identity of a league was caught lying to itself. For years, the WNBA sold this image of being different. Of being the league that gets it. Where players were more than just athletes. Where voices were valued. Where integrity wasn't just a buzzword and a mission statement. It was supposed to be the foundation. But if everything in those leaked emails and messages is to be believed, that image was carefully constructed to mask something else entirely. Control. Behind all the empowerment slogans and equality hashtags was a leadership strategy built on silencing the very players the league claimed to champion. And Cathy Engelbert was allegedly the architect of that silence. Her leadership at first was praised. People called her the stabilizer, the outsider who could bring business legitimacy to the league, the one who would bring the WNBA into its next era. She made deals. She got media attention. She was the face of progress. But behind the scenes, she was allegedly cutting the mic on anyone who didn't fit her version of acceptable. That's not just hypocrisy. That's strategic manipulation. The very players who carried the league through its lowest moments, through the pandemic, through pay disputes, through social justice upheaval, were now being treated like PR risks. And when those same players raised concerns, the league didn't lean in. It shut them out. The league showed just how calculated it all was. Not just one-off decisions or isolated mistakes. These were patterns. Alleged efforts to push certain athletes out of the spotlight. Limit their appearances. Freeze them out of media ops. Messages about minimizing disruptions that, once you read between the lines, translated into control the players. And the thing is, those disruptions weren't scandals. They were opinions. Advocacy. Public critiques of how the league was being run. Basically, athletes doing exactly what the WNBA had once celebrated them for doing. Except now, under Engelbert, those same actions were considered threats. You can't claim to lead a progressive league and then turn around and penalize your most vocal athletes for pushing back. That's not leadership. That's authoritarianism in a pantsuit. By the time the players started breaking down publicly, when the emotional weight of the suppression finally cracked open on live streams and interviews, it was already too late to contain it. Fans were furious. Sponsors were on edge. The media stopped asking polite questions and started digging. And the silence from the league office? Until Adam Silver showed up. Let's talk about that moment again, because it matters. In a room full of league officials, executives, and decision-makers, Silver didn't tap dance around the issue. He didn't say, "We'll look into it," or "Let's schedule a follow-up." He confronted Engelbert in front of everyone and made it clear her time was up. He didn't protect her. He didn't soften the blow. He removed her. Publicly. That wasn't just a leadership move. It was a message. to the players, to the fans, to every other commissioner in pro sports. You do not get to build a league on the backs of athletes while simultaneously trying to silence them behind closed doors. And in that moment, Silver did what the WNBA leadership refused to do. He believed the players. He listened. He acted. And that action didn't come in the form of a months-long internal review. It came with consequences, immediate ones. With Engelbert out, the league is trying to rebuild. They've reinstated the players who were allegedly targeted, announced new reforms, promised to create a player advisory council with real power, not a symbolic seat at the table. They've launched a full internal audit of how decisions were made during Engelbert's time in power. It all sounds good on paper, but the truth? Rebuilding trust takes more than checklists. Because players aren't just angry, they're exhausted. They spent months, even years, carrying a league that was quietly cutting them down. They were asked to be role models, ambassadors, community leaders, and when they did that too well, they were allegedly labeled difficult. This is what happens when leadership fears accountability more than failure. Engelbert's removal was necessary, but she wasn't acting alone. She had people around her who enabled it. People who saw what was happening and chose comfort over confrontation. The people who benefited from silence, who enforced policies without asking questions. Those people are still there. If the league is serious about moving forward, it has to root out all of it. Not just the head of the problem, but the system that allowed it to thrive. That means digging deeper, listening harder, giving players full transparency, and most of all, respecting them enough to stop using their voices only when it's convenient for the brand. Because let's be honest, without these players, there is no WNBA. Not just in terms of talent or skill, but in terms of meaning. The league isn't just sports. It's activism. It's cultural relevance. It's women, and particularly Black women, standing at the intersection of sports and society and saying, we're more than this game. The WNBA marketed that. Cathy Engelbert cashed in on that, and then allegedly tried to kill it when it no longer served her control. That's why this isn't just a shakeup. It's a turning point. This is the moment where the league either becomes what it says it is, or admits that it was only ever interested in the illusion. So what now? Every hiring decision from here on out will be watched. Every policy change, every interaction between league officials and players. The microscope is there, and it's not going away. This is a new chapter, but it's also a trial. The WNBA doesn't get to start fresh. It has to earn its reset, step by step. And the players? They'll be leading that charge whether the league likes it or not. So if you've been watching this unfold and wondering if change is real, stay locked in. Because the pressure is still on, and the league still has everything to prove. Drop your thoughts below. Was Engelbert's removal the beginning of reform? Or just the first domino? Can trust actually be rebuilt? Or is the damage permanent? Let's talk. Like if you think leadership starts with listening. Share this if you're tired of seeing athletes get punished for using their voice. And hit subscribe if you want the full story, not just the headlines, but what's really happening behind the curtain. Because this league can still be what it promised, but only if the players are the ones holding the pen.